瓷器是历史的见证，是最日常的器物，也是人类最了不起的黑科技。
Hello, and welcome to this series of podcasts, My Stories of Chinese Porcelain. I am Tu Ming, a craftsman and writer on Chinese porcelain based in Qingduashen, China, known as the Porcelain Capital. I hope you've enjoyed hearing my podcasts about porcelain. In this final episode, I will talk about the decline of Chinese porcelain from the early 20th century and the opportunities and challenges that Qingduashen is facing now. I am a porcelain enthusiast, so I can't help myself noticing porcelain wherever I see it. One day I was watching the 2016 Hollywood World War II spy movie Allied, which starred Brad Pitt. There was a scene in the movie set in Casablanca in 1942, and a couple were drinking tea using ordinary-looking blue-rimmed teacups. Is the movie producer using historically correct teacups in the movie? Could that kind of porcelain teacup have been made in China and exported to the world in the first half of the 20th century? As a native resident living in Qingduashen and a self-confessed porcelain fanatic, I could not wait to find out the answer. After looking into it more carefully, I would say that piece of blue-rimmed teacup was not produced in Qingduashen because the white body is too white and the blue rim is too blue. Qingduashen's porcelain white would always include a touch of very light greenish blue, and the blue colour is more subtle, with less of a contrast with the white. The blue-rimmed teacup in the movie must have been made overseas, not in China. After further research, I found the following records from the 1920 book Qingduashen Porcelain Chronicle. Chinese consumers are obsessed with foreign imported products. Using porcelain as an example, all of the department stores have been dumped with cheap Japanese and Western Chinaware. It has happened not only in the major cities of Beijing, Tianjin and Shanghai, but also in other smaller cities. The foreign blue-rimmed teacup and teapot are so popular that every restaurant, cafe, bar and social meeting place must use them to be modern and welcoming. Even the countryside grocery stores are selling this kind of imported porcelain. The whole of China is filled with imports now. Though China invented porcelain and dominated worldwide production and trade for centuries, from the 19th century, due to the Western world's industrialization, the whole Chinese porcelain industry was lagging far behind. After the first official mission to China in 1793 and a later series of events like the First and Second Opium Wars, the Western world's view of China changed. In their minds, China was no longer an old, rich and mysterious civilization, but backward, arrogant, decaying, and vulnerable. After nearly 200 years of development, there was no need for the West to learn from the Chinese porcelain industry anymore. On the contrary, the Western industrialized world developed their own technology and styles of making high-quality porcelain. Since their porcelain production was on an industrial scale, they needed a huge market in which to dump. That's why in the late 19th century and the first half of the 20th century, the Chinese market was full of imported products, including porcelain. Based on the official record, in 1930, China's imported porcelain exceeded porcelain exports for the first time. In 1931, the value of Chinese porcelain exports dropped from 1930's 2.56 million to 1.71 million taels of silver. That was a 33% drop in 1 year. Chinese porcelain had totally lost its battle to keep its identity and market share at that time. Why did this happen? As I mentioned in my previous podcast, there were a few reasons during that period. One is that production techniques had not changed for thousands of years in China. The West, however, was already using more modern technology to produce porcelain and also using machines to mass-produce porcelain products. The fuel and the firing method had changed. Control of the kiln temperature became easier, and every ingredient and procedure became more scientifically researched and studied. Secondly, brand power and the commercialization of the industry had a huge impact. There was an old Chinese saying that the emperor's daughter does not need to worry about finding a husband. For centuries, Chinese porcelain was sought after by buyers worldwide. The Chinese porcelain industry used to be visited by the buyers. It never thought about going out itself to explore the market. Even though porcelain was produced in large volumes, each individual kiln was still a small, old-fashioned craftsman's workshop. They were not modern enterprises like the Western ones. Commercial branding really was a foreign concept to the Chinese porcelain industry right up until the middle of the 20th century, while the major, well-marketed brands of porcelain like Meissen and Wedgwood had already been running for about 200 years. I would say the Chinese porcelain industry had been in decline since the late Qing dynasty, in essence because of industrialization and commercialization. Unfortunately, China did not keep pace and was left behind. It can happen to any traditional industry. After the collapse of the Qing dynasty in 1911, China was in chaos, afflicted by constant civil wars and foreign invasions by the major world powers. After 1949, the People's Republic of China was founded, and most of the old workshops and kilns were pooled together to form larger state-owned enterprises. Qingduoshen was still producing lots of porcelain for the reclaimed export market. The porcelain products made before 1978 would have typical styles reflecting the political and social developments between 1949 to 1978. It also produced some traditional items, vases, bowls, plates and the like for the export market. After 1978, China opened up to the world and started economic reform. In 40 years, China's economic development has been astonishing, and the country has built up the largest manufacturing economy in the world. It became the world's factory, and during this period, Qingduoshen's porcelain industry was upgraded and developed as well. Even in this post-industrialized age, Qingduoshen still has the largest workforce and number of skilled craftsmen, the complete supply chain, and the high standards of the earlier handmade porcelain industry. There are lots of different brands originating from Qingduoshen nowadays, though there is still no worldwide flagship brand as yet. So, what is the future of Qingduoshen's porcelain? Where might the whole industry be heading? Will it continue to follow the path of industrialization, or will this historic porcelain capital find its own unique handmade style and market position in the post-industrialized age? As always, only history will tell. Thank you for listening to this last episode of my story of Chinese porcelain. I trust you enjoyed this series of podcasts and hope you can look at porcelain now with a new understanding. Thank you for your company, and goodbye for now.
因为青花瓷是整个制瓷史上一次重要的技术突破。
This has been a China Plus podcast. Original Chinese reading was by Sanliang Zhongdu, with English translation by Graham Stevens. If you like the show, please give us a rating and subscribe to us wherever you listen. If you've got any questions or feedback, please feel free to contact us via email at podcast@cri.com.cn or on Twitter at #ChinaPlusPods.